Hello and welcome to the webinar today on supporting your child on the return to school following lockdown. Hopefully this webinar will give you a chance to think about planning for your child's transition back to school, and it should be particularly helpful for children who are feeling anxious about this or for children that find transitions and change more challenging in general. So we know that changes and transitions can be hard, especially when they're unexpected, as this can lead us to feel that things are out with our control, and that leads to an increase in anxiety, as well as a whole range of other emotions as well. And returning to school is another change which might trigger anxiety, not only for your child, but also for you. Although for some of you, this might come as a bit of a relief that the days of homeschooling will be over. So we know that children will have responded to lockdown in different ways. And for some of them, they might have found it really difficult not being in school, not seeing their friends, their teachers, missing certain classes. And you might notice that their anxiety's increased as a result of that, and that they're quite looking forward to that return to school. For some children, however, lockdown might have been really supportive of their mental health. So particularly for children that find the school environment more challenging, that worry about exams, about schoolwork, or have some difficulties with friendships, they might have found it really nice to be at home during this period, and it might be quite a thought for them thinking about returning to school again. These reactions are to be expected, and they're a really normal response to what has been an abnormal and uncertain situation for a number of months now. What's really helpful to do to begin with is to check in on how your child is feeling. And we've got another episode in our webinar series in regards to talking with your child about anxiety, which you might find helpful if you're unsure about doing that. So pay attention to the things that they're saying to you. Is your child verbalizing any worries that they have? Have you noticed changes in their behavior? And the things that you might need to look out for in terms of their behavior, they will vary depending on the age of your child, but you might notice your child complaining of physical symptoms, stomach aches, headaches, a funny feeling in their tummy. With younger children, they might be having more tantrums. Some children might be worried about separating from yourself. So at bedtime or at times if you're leaving them, they might become quite upset and distressed. You might see a regression in some behaviours such as bedwetting, which is something they haven't done for a while. They might have unsettled sleep. There might be changes to their appetite. They might seek a lot of reassurance and ask lots of questions, and it feels like the reassurance that you're giving is never enough. And for some children, they might be afraid to leave the house due to COVID-19 worries. And with slightly older children, you might see that there's an increase in acting out behaviours. They might be more argumentative, they might overreact to small things, they might be catastrophizing in regards to what may happen that's negative. Or on the contrary, they might become more withdrawn into themselves. And with teenagers, it can be a bit tricky to kind of pick out what's that normal teenage behavior, and what behavior we should be a bit more concerned about. But we've also got another episode on understanding the adolescent brain, and that can be really helpful to get a better understanding of some of those behaviors and why your teenager is presenting the way that they are. So once you've been able to identify how your child's feeling, it's really important to acknowledge that and normalize it for them. So by saying something as, I notice that you're feeling really anxious about going back to school, and that's okay. It's normal to feel that way after not being in school for so long and being unsure about what to expect. And that can just feel really validating for your child rather than saying, oh, it's okay, you'll be fine. So in terms of what to expect when we're adapting to change, and this goes for us adults as well as for children, we have a diagram that shows typically what happens. And this is probably something that will seem familiar, and you'll have seen in yourself and your child as we've come in and out of the previous lockdowns. So in the context of returning to school, we start off with that honeymoon phase, and that can be some excitement about returning to school. So your child might be excited about seeing friends, teachers, about socializing, about going back to after school activities and that face-to-face contact. So after that initial honeymoon phase, they might move down into the shock phase. And this is where bit of fatigue might develop over the changes, over the rules, over that increase in stimulation. And you might see some an increase in some challenging behaviours or in some anxiety related behaviours that we mentioned previously. And it's just to reassure you that those changes are normal. So don't be surprised if after that initial excitement on the return to school, you do see that dips for a period of time. Following that phase, we then go into the adjustment phase. So gradually we start to get used to things again. Those changes and those rules feel more familiar, and we adapt to that new routine and that day-to-day life. So you'd start to see your child starting to feel a bit more relaxed and at ease. And then finally, in that adaptation phase, this is where you feel really comfortable and you've just adapted to that difference and got back to that kind of day-to-day routine again. So it's just, I think, helpful to be mindful of this and how it will vary for each child. This is generally what it looks like, but this will vary for child to child, and that period of time, again, will vary for each child. And it might be that this transition back to change is reset following if there's another lockdown, following school holidays, or if your child has to self-isolate, you might find yourself going through this process again with your child. So in terms of how best to support your child, hopefully though you'll get plenty of warning and notice this time before schools return, and that will give you the opportunity to plan ahead as best as possible as to how you'll support your child rather than maybe having to react with little or less notice. So we've already heard recently that there's a plan for early years to return at the end of February. So it's something that you can already be thinking about. Also thinking about how your child usually copes with change and transitions. So are there things that helped when your child returned to school following the previous lockdown? Are there strategies that they benefited from having in place? Are there things that really didn't work? So having a review of those can be really helpful. And finally, just being aware of your own feelings of anxiety and how you're managing these. So we know that children will pick up on how adults around them are coping and responding to situations. So if you're feeling really anxious or you're talking about your anxiety about the return to school, then chances are your child might feel the same way. So just be aware of that and make use of your own coping strategies and supports, which hopefully you have in place. In terms of practical strategies, like I mentioned, talking about the return to school can be really helpful. So some children, when they're feeling anxious about things, want to avoid them. But if you can start having those conversations, that can be really helpful. Some children might benefit from having social stories to introduce that return to school or working through workbooks. And the CAMHS early intervention team in Grampian have developed some going back to school workbooks which are available, and the link will be below the video. Making a list of what needs to be done before going back to school can be really helpful, and identifying areas or things that your child can help with. So organising their uniform, looking at all the schoolwork they need to take back, preparing their school bag, making sure they've got all their resources that they need, or helping with their lunchbox or letting you know what they'd like in their lunchbox. Children really benefit from having a consistent routine in place. So if you're able to make sure that your routine is similar to the school routine as much as possible, that will be really helpful for your child. So trying to make bedtimes the same as when your child is at school, especially for those teenagers. We've heard a lot about teenagers turning day into night, which is quite common at that age. But they might need a bit of a longer period for them to gradually bring their bedtime earlier so that they can be getting up for school in the morning without too much issue. Giving your child break and lunch times when they'd usually have them at school can be helpful in terms of getting them used to that return to school. Getting them out of the house, doing exercise, again for their playtime and lunch times will be helpful. And for some children, they might benefit from doing the walk or the journey to school that you would usually do if it's been a while since they've done that. You might also want to think about reducing screen time. We know that will have increased over lockdown with school being done virtually. Some children might benefit from having a visual timetable as to what to expect. So if they ask lots of questions and they're not sure, then creating a visual timetable, you can get templates of these online. You can draw one up yourself, or you can take photos of your child working through the different steps of what they need to do in the morning before school. And praising your child and rewarding them for adapting to this new routine and timetable is also going to be really helpful. If you've got information from school as to what changes might be in place, share those with your child in an age-appropriate way. The information that we have can really help reduce our anxiety as well if it's accurate and correct. So let them know if there's going to be any changes to the routine or the structure of the day. And that might include things such as drop off, pick up, break time, lunch times, and different rules that might be in place, such as washing their hands and keeping distance from people. Also, communicate with school staff and let them know of any concerns you've had about your child during lockdown while they've been at home. You might even experienced a loss in your family as a result of COVID-19, and do let the school know about this. And also, if there's been any difficulties in general that you or your child have had, do share this with the school so that they can be mindful of this when your child returns. In regards to addressing specific worries that your child might have, so if when you've been talking with them about how they're feeling, you have identified that there are some worries, it can be really helpful to come up with a plan as to how you're going to support them. So if your child's anxious about separating from you, and about returning to school and that increase in separation, I start to have conversations talking about what they enjoy about school. What are the things that they're looking forward to? What are the things that they've maybe missed? If you're able to, practice spending some time apart. So your child's getting used to you not being with them all of the time. Focus on having some fun in the morning. If you can, having your child choose a breakfast that they would like, putting on some fun music. You could also try practicing some relaxation strategies. And again, we've got an episode on body tools, which you can watch to get some great ideas as to strategies that you can use and activities that might be helpful for your child. Playing distraction games on the journey to school, so to try and keep your child's mind off their feelings of anxiety. Something called a transitional object, so just giving the child something from home that they can take to school can be quite helpful. Also creating coping cards or messages that you hide in their school bag or their lunchbox just to let them know that you're thinking about them can be quite a nice thing for children to have. If you've got an older child, just sending them a text message to check in or arranging a call at lunchtime to see how they're getting on. Can also be nice to plan enjoyable activities for after school. So asking your child what it is that they would like to do, what's a bit of a treat for them that you're able to do at the moment. And we know that for some children, returning to school will be really difficult. It might have been hard for them to attend school prior to COVID-19, and they might have been on a reduced timetable, or they might have been working through a phased return to school. And if that's the case, do get in touch with the school to review that plan and agree what will be in place. For children that are maybe feeling anxious about schoolwork, about exams and tests, it's really important to normalise those worries, because it has been quite an uncertain time for those children that are, due to undertake exams. If it's something they're really worried about, consider talking to their teachers or their guidance teacher to share the concerns that they have, or encourage your child to do that themselves. And if your child would find it supportive, come up with a plan as to how you might help them at home with their studying. For children that might be feeling anxious about COVID-19 in school and those associated changes, ensure, like we said previously, that you have up-to-date information from the school as to what they should expect on the return. Try and frame rules around COVID-19 as positive and protective in a helpful way. So using do's for rules rather than don'ts, such as do wash your hands more often, do try and keep your distance from people, do listen to what the teacher is saying. And for some children, hearing about COVID on the 19 on the news can really increase their anxiety. And if that is true for your child, do just be aware of when the news is on the radio or it's on the TV, or if it's coming up on news apps on the iPad, on your phone, and limit that for them. if that would be helpful. And finally, some children might be feeling anxious about seeing their friends. So some children might not have been able to see their friends very much during the lockdown period. Or if they have, it might have been in a different way, doing so virtually. So if you can find a way to connect your child with their friends, whether that's through a call or a video chat, maybe playing some online games. If you can arrange a meetup before the schools return, so maybe the weekend before, that can be really helpful. Or you could also arrange to meet their friend on the way to school, which should be nice as well. So just in summary, we know that different strategies and approaches will work for different children. So do try out a range of strategies and pick the ones that work best. We know that children will adapt at different speeds to this transition back to school, and we know that the adjustment period can take some time for children. So you'll see below that we have various episodes available in this webinar series around supporting your child, so please have a look at those. And if you feel that you need any further support, we've got the details of some helplines which are available there. Or if you're really worried about the level of your child's anxiety, do have a conversation with the school or contact your GP who'll be able to provide you with further support. Thank you.